They built houses from the bones of extinct giants that kept families warmer than your house does today. 200-pound mammoth skulls, curved tusks forming domes. Built 30,000 years ago with stone tools, these structures maintain temperatures 50 degrees warmer than outside air in negative 40-degree winters. And modern engineers still can't figure out how they knew what they knew. The popular image of early humans during ice ages usually involves huddling around fires in the mouths of caves. But archaeological evidence reveals that our ancestors developed winter survival technologies so effective that they enabled human expansion into the most challenging environments on the planet. From the mammoth bone houses of Ukraine to the underground thermal chambers of Russia, Paleolithic peoples created winter shelters that would impress modern Arctic engineers. This is not just a story of survival. This is the moment humanity faced its deadliest enemy and won through engineering genius and unbreakable determination. But to understand how extraordinary their achievement was, you first have to understand just how brutal the enemy really was. The bitter wind howls across the frozen landscape as temperatures plummet to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds exceed 60 miles per hour, creating wind chills that freeze exposed flesh in under 5 minutes. Modern survival experts estimate that without proper shelter and heating, a human being would die of exposure in 2 to 4 hours under these conditions. Even with thick modern clothing, survival beyond 24 hours would be nearly impossible. During the height of the last ice age, winter on the northern steppes was a 6-month siege that tested every limit of human endurance. Yet somewhere in this frozen wasteland, smoke rises from beneath the snow. Inside underground chambers heated by carefully managed fires, families sleep soundly while the storm rages above. Children play. Artists carve intricate figurines. Life continues. To understand this victory, you need to understand the enemy. And the enemy wasn't an army or a predator. It was physics itself. Sit on frozen ground and feel the cold suck life from your body through your clothes, through your skin, draining warmth like a vampire. Stand in the wind and feel it strip heat from every inch of exposed skin. Breathe and watch your body's warmth vanish into frozen air with every exhale. Even sweat becomes a traitor, evaporating and chilling you to the bone. Ice Age winter attacked from every angle simultaneously. It was designed to kill you, and it was mercilessly efficient. But there was another enemy, more insidious than the cold itself: moisture. When warm human breath meets frozen air inside an enclosed space, condensation forms. That condensation freezes. Ice accumulates on walls and ceilings. The shelter becomes a frozen tomb. Modern Arctic researchers know this problem well. It's called moisture management, and solving it requires sophisticated ventilation engineering. Caves, death traps. Poor ventilation meant moisture buildup and ice on the ceiling. You'd wake up to carbon monoxide poisoning or freeze to death from condensation. And caves were rarely near the resources families needed: food sources, water, and materials for tool making. Early humans needed something better. They needed to engineer a solution. And here's what those modern survival experts don't know. Our ancestors had figured out something that wouldn't be formally understood by science for 28,000 years. And it started by doing the one thing that seems completely insane. They went underground. When nature tries to kill you, you make nature work for you instead. This principle, simple but revolutionary, guided every aspect of Paleolithic winter shelter design. And it started with a profound understanding of thermal physics that scientists wouldn't describe for another 28,000 years. At Kostenki in Russia, dating back 800,000 years, researchers discovered remains of what may be humanity's first engineered cold weather housing. These early Arctic pioneers had excavated circular depressions up to 8 feet deep and 12 feet across, creating foundations for semi-subterranean winter homes. But these weren't random holes in the ground. They were precision engineering. By digging below the frost line, early humans accessed Earth's natural insulation properties. At depths of 6 to 8 feet, soil temperatures remain relatively stable year-round, typically 20 to 30 degrees warmer than surface air during winter. Tool marks and soil analysis show these depths were deliberately chosen for maximum thermal efficiency. The excavated earth wasn't wasted. It was piled around the perimeter to create berms that provided additional wind protection and thermal mass. Imagine being the first person to figure this out. The countless winters of trial and error, the families who froze before the breakthrough, the children who died before someone noticed the pattern. Each innovation in this system was paid for in lives. Every technique perfected through tragedy. And then one winter, someone dug deep enough, and their family survived while others didn't. That knowledge became sacred, but digging underground was just the beginning. What they built above ground would change everything. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, dating to 26,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered evidence of winter shelters that used layered insulation techniques not seen again until modern times. The walls incorporated multiple material layers, each serving a specific thermal function. It was composite engineering that would make a modern materials scientist weep. The innermost layer consisted of carefully prepared animal hides with the fur side facing inward. This wasn't decorative, it was physics. Fur traps air in millions of tiny pockets, creating an insulating barrier that holds warm air against occupants' bodies. Outside this, a layer of dried grass and moss provided additional insulation while serving a second critical function. These materials wicking moisture away from the interior, preventing the deadly condensation that turned caves into tombs. The outermost layer used woven mats made from reeds and bark. These created a wind-resistant barrier that could withstand 60-mile-per-hour gusts while allowing moisture to escape through carefully designed gaps. The system was breathable, preventing the ice buildup that killed families in sealed shelters. Picture the moment of discovery. Someone realizes that 3 layers working together create something none of them can do alone. Protection from wind, insulation from cold, management of the moisture that kills. It's not just survival, it's engineering genius born from desperate necessity. If you want to see more stories about the incredible innovations that shaped human history, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. The composite insulation systems were extraordinary, but they were just the foundation for what came next, the masterpiece. The structures that archaeologists still study in awe today, trying to understand how people with stone tools could engineer something this sophisticated. The mammoth bone houses. At sites like Mezherych and Kostenki in Ukraine and Russia, dating between 25,000 and 15,000 years ago, researchers discovered remains of structures that represent some of the most sophisticated prehistoric architecture ever found. These weren't simple huts. They were engineered fortresses designed specifically to beat physics at its own game. And they worked so well that modern military Arctic training programs now teach shelter-building methods directly derived from their designs. The construction began with careful planning. Builders excavated circular or oval depressions approximately 12 to 16 feet in diameter, designed to accommodate extended families of 8 to 12 individuals. But the excavation itself was strategic. The removed earth was piled around the perimeter to create protective berms. These served triple duty as windbreaks, thermal mass that absorbed and released heat slowly, and structural support for the framework that would rise above. The framework used the massive bones of woolly mammoths, animals that had evolved their own sophisticated adaptations to extreme cold. Mammoth skulls, some weighing over 200 pounds, were positioned as foundation blocks. The sheer mass of these bones provided stability and thermal mass. Curved tusks and long femurs created the dome-shaped framework, an aerodynamic design that deflected wind and shed snow efficiently. Hundreds of smaller bones, ribs, vertebrae, and jaw fragments filled structural gaps and provided attachment points for the covering system. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Radiocarbon dating shows that many of these bones came from mammoths that had died decades or even centuries earlier. The builders weren't hunting mammoths for construction materials. They were systematically collecting bones from natural boneyards across the landscape. This reveals sophisticated resource management and planning that extended across seasons and even generations. Communities knew where boneyards were located. They transported materials weighing hundreds of pounds across miles of frozen terrain. They stockpiled resources for construction projects that might not begin for months. This is project management on a scale that rivals modern construction. The covering system revealed extraordinary innovation in textile technology. Analysis of preserved organic materials shows that builders created composite wall systems using multiple types of animal hides. Thick mammoth hides formed the structural outer layer, massive pieces of leather sewn together with sinew thread using bone needles. The stitching patterns show sophisticated understanding of stress points and load distribution. Inside this outer layer, smaller animal pelts from wolves, foxes, and Arctic hares provided additional insulation. The layering created dead air spaces that dramatically improved thermal efficiency. The entire covering system was anchored to the bone framework using a complex arrangement of rawhide ropes and bone toggles, allowing sections to be tightened or loosened to maintain proper tension as materials expanded and contracted with temperature changes. That bone toggle system, it adjusted tension automatically as materials expanded and contracted, self-adjusting climate control. 30,000 years ago, with nothing but bones and sinew and observation of how materials behave in extreme cold, but these bone fortresses had a fatal flaw. Without solving one invisible problem, every family inside would be dead by morning. And the solution they invented, modern engineers are still trying to figure out how they knew. Heating these large winter shelters required sophisticated fire management that went far beyond simply lighting a fire and hoping for warmth. At most mammoth bonehouse sites, archaeologists have found evidence of multiple hearth systems designed to maximize heat distribution while minimizing fuel consumption. A central hearth provided primary heating, positioned directly beneath the highest point of the dome where natural convection would distribute warm air efficiently. Smaller heating stations around the perimeter created warm zones for specific activities: food preparation, tool making, hide processing. Each hearth was carefully sized and positioned to provide light and heat exactly where needed without wasting precious fuel, and fuel management was critical. In treeless steppe environments, Paleolithic peoples couldn't rely on wood for heating. Instead, they developed techniques for using mammoth dung, dried grasses, and even bone as fuel. Chemical analysis of hearth residues shows these alternative fuels were processed and prepared to maximize burn efficiency and heat output. Mammoth dung was dried and compacted into dense fuel blocks. Bones were broken to expose marrow-rich interiors that burned with high heat. Grasses were twisted into dense bundles that provided steady, long-lasting flames. Experimental reconstructions show that properly managed hearth systems could maintain interior temperatures 40 to 50 degrees warmer than outside air using surprisingly modest fuel consumption. A family could heat their shelter through a harsh winter night using resources they could gather in a few hours during the day. But perhaps the most ingenious aspect of these winter fortresses was the system that kept occupants alive when fires burned low or went out entirely. The ventilation system. Modern Arctic engineers understand that proper ventilation is crucial for cold weather structures. Without it, moisture from breathing and cooking creates condensation that freezes and makes shelters uninhabitable. Carbon monoxide from fires accumulates to deadly levels. Air quality deteriorates until occupants become sick or die. Solving these problems requires controlled airflow that removes moisture and replenishes oxygen while preserving precious heat. Paleolithic builders solved this problem with remarkable sophistication. Researchers found evidence of carefully designed airflow systems. Small openings near ground level allowed fresh air to enter the shelter. These intake vents were positioned on the side away from prevailing winds, preventing cold drafts while ensuring steady airflow. Larger openings near the top of the dome allowed warm, moisture-laden air to escape. The positioning created natural convection currents. Cold air entered low, warm air rose and exited high. The constant circulation maintained air quality while the thermal mass of the structure preserved warmth. Some sites even show evidence of adjustable ventilation systems. Bone and hide flaps could be opened or closed depending on weather conditions and interior temperature. During extreme cold, vents could be partially closed to preserve heat. During cooking or when moisture built up, vents could be fully opened to maximize airflow. This is dynamic climate control using only natural materials and physical principles. The result was a living space that remained habitable for months at a time. Interior temperatures stayed warm enough for children to play without heavy clothing. Air quality remained good enough for detailed craftwork and artistic creation. Picture the scene. 20 feet of snow above you, -40 outside, wind screaming across the steppe at 60 miles per hour. But inside this mammoth bone dome, a child of 3 runs around barefoot, warm enough to play. An elder teaches teenagers how to knap flint, passing down techniques that mean the difference between life and death. A woman carves ivory into art that will survive 30,000 years. A mother nurses an infant in comfort that shouldn't be possible. This wasn't desperate survival. This was civilization, in the middle of hell on Earth. This was humanity looking at winter and saying, "You don't get to win," and they did create. The famous Venus figurines found at many Paleolithic sites were often discovered in winter shelter contexts, suggesting that long winter months were times for artistic expression and cultural development. Portable art objects, decorated tools, carved ivory ornaments. These weren't the products of desperate survivors clinging to life. They were the work of people who had conquered winter so thoroughly that they had time and energy for beauty. If you've learned something new about how our ancestors survived the impossible, drop a comment below telling us what surprised you most. And if you think your friends would find this fascinating, share this video with them. The structures themselves were incredible. But what happened inside them during those 6 dark months reveals something even more extraordinary about what it means to be human. The social organization within winter shelters reveals fascinating insights into Paleolithic family life and the transmission of survival knowledge. Archaeological evidence suggests these structures were designed for extended family groups with specialized areas for different activities and age groups. Sleeping areas were typically arranged around the central hearth, with the warmest spots reserved for infants and elderly family members. This wasn't sentiment, it was survival strategy. The youngest and oldest were most vulnerable to cold. Protecting them ensured the survival of future generations and the preservation of crucial knowledge held by elders. Tool-making areas were positioned near secondary hearths where good light and heat were available for detailed work. Analysis of artifact distributions shows that craftspeople worked in specific locations, creating what were essentially prehistoric workshops: bone needle production, stone tool knapping, hide processing. Each activity had its designated space within the broader shelter system. Food storage within winter shelters was another crucial innovation. In permafrost regions, Paleolithic peoples learned to use natural freezing as a preservation method. At many sites, archaeologists found evidence of underground storage chambers connected to winter shelters by short tunnels. These natural refrigerators kept meat fresh throughout winter while remaining accessible even during severe storms. Temperature stability in these underground chambers prevented the freeze-thaw cycles that would spoil food, while the tunnel access meant families never had to venture into deadly weather to retrieve supplies. The construction timeline reveals remarkable planning abilities. Experimental archaeology suggests that building a mammoth bone house required 2 to 3 weeks of intensive work by a group of 8 to 10 adults. This means construction had to begin well before winter weather made outdoor work impossible. Analysis of tool wear patterns and seasonal indicators suggests most winter shelters were built during late summer and early autumn, demonstrating sophisticated seasonal planning that extended months into the future. But building the shelter was only the beginning. Maintenance throughout the winter was an ongoing engineering challenge. Archaeological evidence shows occupants regularly repaired and upgraded their structures as cold seasons progressed. Broken bones were replaced. Damaged hide coverings were patched using spare materials stockpiled specifically for repairs. Insulation materials were refreshed when they became compressed or moisture damaged. This wasn't simply reactive maintenance. It was proactive engineering that improved shelter performance over time. Each winter was a learning experience. Each repair was an innovation that would be remembered and incorporated into the next year's construction. The psychological aspects of winter shelter design were also carefully considered. Living in enclosed spaces for months at a time could lead to serious mental health issues, something modern Arctic researchers and submarine crews know well. Paleolithic builders addressed this through architectural features that provided psychological comfort and maintained social cohesion. Many shelters included areas with higher ceilings and better lighting for communal gatherings. Sleeping areas were arranged to provide some privacy while maintaining social connection. Art and decoration weren't luxuries. They were psychological necessities that made months of confinement bearable. For 10,000 years, this knowledge passed from parent to child with perfect precision. One mistake in teaching, one misunderstood detail about ventilation, placement, or insulation layering, and your family dies. The stakes were absolute. The teaching had to be perfect, and for 10,000 years it was. Elders who held this knowledge were the most valuable members of any group. They were living libraries of survival information that couldn't be written down, only remembered and passed on through demonstration and practice. The techniques developed for winter survival had profound impacts beyond simply staying warm. They enabled human expansion into vast regions of northern Eurasia that would otherwise have been uninhabitable. This expansion brought access to new resources and hunting grounds, supporting larger populations and accelerating cultural development. From Arctic coasts to mountain peaks, each group adapted these core principles to their terrain. Same engineering genius, different materials, all solving the same impossible problem. The diversity of solutions across different regions shows that Paleolithic peoples weren't following a single cultural template. They were actively engineering solutions optimized for their specific environmental challenges. They had conquered winter, built civilization on frozen ground, raised healthy children in environments that should have killed them within hours, and then, almost overnight, it all vanished. The knowledge that had taken 10,000 years to perfect was lost in a single generation. The victory was absolute. Humanity had conquered the impossible winter. Families raised healthy children in environments that should have killed them. Populations expanded into territories that should have been uninhabitable. Culture flourished during months that should have been dedicated solely to survival. But just like the heroes at Belgrade, the triumph came with a cost. The knowledge nearly died. As the ice ages ended and climates warmed, forests expanded and winters became less severe. The sophisticated winter shelter technologies that had enabled human survival for tens of thousands of years were no longer necessary. Mammoth bone house construction techniques were forgotten as mammoths went extinct, and forests provided ample wood for simpler structures. Underground thermal engineering became unnecessary as winters grew milder. The knowledge survived only in a few Arctic regions where conditions remained challenging enough to require sophisticated cold weather engineering. Until 1873, that farmer's plow, a circle of massive bones, and archaeologists realizing they were looking at technology that still works better than most modern designs. The rediscovery has provided modern engineers with insights actively being applied today. Military Arctic training programs teach shelter building methods directly derived from these ancient designs. Special forces operators learn to construct semi-subterranean shelters using the same principles Paleolithic peoples developed 30,000 years ago. Disaster relief organizations have adapted ancient composite insulation techniques for emergency shelter construction. NASA engineers studying long-duration space missions have examined these winter shelters for insights into designing habitats where psychological and social factors are as important as thermal efficiency. The principles work. They've always worked, because they're based not on technology, but on physics and human ingenuity. When we consider the sophisticated thermal engineering, the complex material processing, the precise construction techniques, and the detailed environmental knowledge required to build these winter shelters, we see not primitive cave dwellers but accomplished Arctic engineers. Their innovations laid the groundwork for all subsequent cold weather technologies and demonstrated the fundamental human capacity to overcome environmental challenges through ingenuity and cooperation. Every time you adjust your thermostat or check your home's insulation, you're relying on principles first developed by families living through Ice Age winters with nothing but stone tools and natural materials. The composite insulation in your walls, the ventilation system that prevents moisture buildup, the thermal mass of your foundation. All eco techniques perfected 30,000 years ago by engineers who never wrote down a single equation but understood physics at a level that kept their families alive through 6-month sieges of deadly cold. They faced nature's deadliest weapon with stone tools and determination, and they won. They proved that the greatest survival technology isn't claws or thick fur or hibernation. It's the human mind working together with other human minds to solve problems that should be unsolvable. If you found this story of ancient innovation inspiring, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of how human ingenuity shaped our world. Hit that like button and let us know in the comments what piece of history you think deserves to be told next. Our ancestors conquered winter with stone tools and natural materials. What seemingly impossible challenges can we overcome with the tools we have today?